In the years leading up to war, Japan still had a choice. Contrary to how history is often told, conflict with the United States was not inevitable. There was no single moment when war suddenly became unavoidable. No final switch that was flipped. No instant collapse of diplomacy. For years, peace remained a real option. Yet today, the question is not why Japan went to war. The deeper question is why peace was never chosen, even when it was still possible. By the late 1930s, Japan stood at a crossroads. One path promised stability through compromise. The other promised survival through confrontation. Both paths carried enormous risks. Japan was a rising industrial power, but one built on fragile foundations. The country lacked critical natural resources: oil, iron, rubber, the materials required to fuel factories, fleets, and armies, had to be imported. Every modern nation depended on resources, but Japan depended on them almost entirely. At the same time, Japan's expansion across Asia had placed it on a collision course with Western powers. The war in China drained resources at an alarming rate. Factories worked endlessly. Military planners watched stockpiles shrink month by month. Still, war with the United States was not the original goal. Japanese leaders believed that diplomacy could buy time. Time to secure resources. Time to stabilize the empire. Time to avoid a catastrophic confrontation with a far stronger industrial opponent. Across the Pacific, American leaders viewed Japan's actions with growing concern. They saw expansion, not security; aggression, not necessity. And yet, even as tensions rose, negotiations continued. Meetings were held. Messages were exchanged. Envoys traveled back and forth. On the surface, both sides claimed to want peace, but beneath the language of diplomacy, a dangerous misunderstanding was forming. To American officials, peace meant withdrawal, a reversal of expansion, a return to the status quo. To Japanese leaders, peace meant recognition, acceptance of what had already been gained, security without humiliation. These were not small differences. They were fundamentally incompatible visions of the future. As pressure mounted, Japan's leadership faced an impossible dilemma. Backing down risked economic collapse and political instability. Moving forward risked war with a nation whose industrial power far exceeded Japan's own. Still, the choice had not yet been made. In Tokyo, debates intensified. Civilian leaders argued for caution. Military leaders warned that delay only worsened Japan's position. Every month without resolution weakened Japan's leverage. Every concession demanded by the United States appeared, to some, as a step toward national humiliation. By the end of the decade, Japan was no longer asking how to avoid war. It was asking how long peace could be sustained, and at what cost. This was the illusion of choice, a moment in history where multiple paths existed, but every path seemed to lead toward disaster. And the longer Japan waited, the narrower those paths became. While the illusion of choice still existed, time was steadily working against Japan. Diplomacy did not stop. In fact, it intensified. Throughout the late 1930s and into 1941, Japanese and American officials continued to meet, exchange proposals, and search for a way forward. On the surface, both sides spoke of peace, but beneath the formal language, the meaning of peace differed sharply. To leaders in Washington, peace required reversal. Japan would need to withdraw from China. It would need to abandon further expansion. And it would need to accept limits imposed by an international order dominated by Western powers. From the American perspective, these demands were reasonable. They were framed as a return to stability, a restoration of balance, an effort to prevent further conflict in Asia. For Japanese leaders, however, these demands struck at the heart of national pride. Withdrawal meant more than strategic retreat. It meant admitting that years of sacrifice had been meaningless. It meant acknowledging failure before both the world and the Japanese public. And in a political system increasingly influenced by the military, such an admission carried severe consequences. Japanese diplomats attempted to navigate this gap. They proposed partial compromises, limited withdrawals, temporary freezes, promises of future restraint. But trust was already eroding. American officials doubted Japan's intentions. Reports from China suggested continued aggression. Military intelligence warned that Japan was preparing for further expansion, not retreat. Each new proposal was met with suspicion. Each concession was viewed as tactical rather than sincere. As negotiations dragged on, pressure grew on both sides. In Tokyo, civilian leaders struggled to maintain influence. The military argued that diplomacy was failing, that delay only weakened Japan's position, that waiting allowed enemies to strengthen while Japan's resources dwindled. In Washington, patience wore thin. Economic pressure was seen as the last remaining tool. If Japan would not reverse course voluntarily, it might be forced to do so. Sanctions followed. Restrictions tightened. Oil exports were reduced. Critical materials became harder to obtain. For Japan, these measures felt less like diplomacy and more like coercion. Every reduction in supplies shortened the timeline. Every new restriction reinforced the belief that compromise would only invite further demands. By the middle of 1941, diplomacy remained active in name. Meetings continued. Messages were sent. But the foundation of trust had collapsed. Peace was still discussed, but increasingly, it was discussed as a delay, not as a solution. And as the months passed, the space for a genuine agreement narrowed to almost nothing. As diplomacy stalled, the most powerful forces shaping Japan's future were no longer found at the negotiating table. They were inside Japan itself. By the late 1930s, the military had become the dominant voice in Japanese politics. Civilian leaders still existed, but their influence was steadily eroding. Decisions increasingly reflected the priorities of generals and admirals rather than diplomats. For the military, time was the enemy. Japan's economy depended on imported resources. Oil reserves were finite. Steel supplies were shrinking. Every delay reduced Japan's ability to act from a position of strength. Military planners warned that waiting only made Japan weaker. They argued that decisive action now was preferable to slow decline later. There was also the issue of national identity. Japan's leadership viewed their country as a rising power that deserved recognition. Expansion was framed not as conquest, but as liberation, a way to secure Asia from Western dominance and ensure Japan's survival. To reverse course would mean more than strategic retreat. It would mean a loss of honor. In a political culture where honor and strength were deeply intertwined, this mattered profoundly. Civilian leaders who suggested compromise faced intense pressure. Some were accused of weakness, others feared political ruin. A few understood that opposing the military too openly could carry even darker consequences. Public opinion, shaped by years of nationalist messaging, offered little support for retreat. Sacrifice had already been demanded. To abandon expansion now would raise uncomfortable questions about why those sacrifices had been made. Within this environment, the idea of peace became increasingly fragile, not because it was impossible in theory, but because it had become unacceptable in practice. The space for moderation continued to shrink. By 1941, negotiations between Japan and the United States had entered their final phase. Diplomats continued to meet. Proposals continued to circulate. But behind closed doors, decisions were already being made. In Tokyo, military preparations accelerated. Plans were drawn. Timelines were set. Logistics were arranged. These actions did not signal certainty. They signaled readiness. Japanese leaders believed that diplomacy might still succeed, but they no longer trusted it to protect Japan's future. Preparation for war became a form of insurance. In Washington, intelligence reports raised alarm. American officials suspected that Japan was negotiating in bad faith, that talks were being used to buy time rather than achieve peace. This mutual suspicion proved fatal. When final proposals were exchanged, neither side was willing to bend far enough. Each feared that compromise would be exploited by the other. For the United States, easing pressure without clear guarantees risked encouraging further expansion. For Japan, accepting American demands risked internal collapse. The final diplomatic exchanges did not collapse suddenly. They faded. Statements grew colder. Positions hardened. Deadlines passed without resolution. At this point, peace was no longer failing. It had already failed. The machinery of war, once set in motion, could not easily be stopped. By the time negotiations formally ended, the outcome had been decided elsewhere. History often remembers this moment as a single decision. In reality, it was the result of countless smaller choices, each narrowing the path away from conflict. The point of no return had been reached long before anyone publicly acknowledged it. In the end, Japan did not choose war because it desired destruction. It chose war because the alternatives appeared worse. Peace required concessions that Japan's leadership believed the nation could not survive. Withdrawal threatened political instability. Economic dependence threatened long-term security. Loss of honor threatened the legitimacy of those in power. War, by contrast, offered certainty. It promised control over resources, a chance to reshape the strategic environment, an opportunity to force recognition through strength. These calculations were deeply flawed, but they were made within a context of fear, pressure, and diminishing options. Once the decision was made, events moved rapidly. Preparations became commitments. Plans became orders. Diplomacy became a formality. The belief persisted that a decisive strike might secure Japan's future, that speed and surprise could compensate for industrial imbalance, that war, if unavoidable, should be fought on Japan's terms. History would prove otherwise. But at the moment of decision, the future remained unknown. Leaders acted not with certainty, but with desperation. Looking back, it is tempting to see inevitability, to believe that war was always coming. The truth is more unsettling. Peace was possible, but it required choices that no side was willing to make. And so the world crossed another threshold, not in a single dramatic moment, but through a series of decisions that quietly closed every other path. This was not simply the road to war, it was the final step beyond the point of no return.